Behold, ladies and gentlemen, the Wado Ichimonji, the white road to harmony. The finest piece of steel that you could possibly purchase for $37 plus taxes and shipping and handling off of Amazon.com. See how the blade shines and vaguely wobbles a little bit. That's how you know it's truly an Owazamono grade sword. Alright guys, so let's talk about a theory, alright? Now this is not just your standard theory. This isn't just like X equals Y because of Z. There's many different facets of this, but they always tie back to Wano. And the general premise here is that Zoro, our good buddy, our first mate of the crew, even though I guess he doesn't do much first mate activities, but the first mate of the crew of the Straw Hats, as well as Tashigi, who is a busty sword girl that we know and love, and Koushirou, who is the master of Zoro, and Kuina, Koshirou's daughter, who is most likely deceased, probably like 99% deceased. All of those characters have a connection to the country of Wano, and I think you can see right out of the gate why that theory exists. It's because Wano is the country of katanas and samurai and daimyo and all that stuff, and all those characters I mentioned love swords. You know, Zoro uses Santoryu, Tashigi is a sword geek, Kuina was the one sword master that could even best Zoro at his young age, and then Koushirou was the master at the Ishin Dojo at Shimosuke Village in the East Blue that taught both Zoro and Kuina. And if that word, Shimosuke, sounds familiar, it's this completely went over my head. It did. I knew the village that Zoro lived at was Shimosuke. I did a whole video on the East Blue a few months back, and I talked about it, but in the chapter this week where we got Yasue's full name, Yasue Shimosuke, it just blanked, and then I was reading Artur's translation of it, and I'm like, holy crap! Okay, yeah, that's something. That might be the smoking gun right there, because I was under the opinion, I was just like, alright, look, I'm okay if we find out that, like, maybe not Zoro, but I'm okay if we find out, like, Zoro's parents were from Wano. I mean, it does make sense, you know, because we don't know anything about Zoro's parents. Like, it was never mentioned. At least Frankie's family, not the Frankie family, but Frankie's actual biological family, his parents, they were at least given, like, a throwaway. I think, Zambai, at the end of the Enies Lobby arc, when they got their new, you know, wanted posters. They were like, oh, Straw Hat, you gotta take Big Bro Frankie with you. His parents were pirates. It's in his blood. And it was mentioned that, yeah, his parents were pirates, and they brought him into the Grand Line, and they just basically ditched him on Water 7. But, you know, so we're probably not gonna see Frankie's parents at some point, but at least it was mentioned, you know, while we're probably never gonna see them. They're most likely dead. But, when it comes to Zoro, his mommy and daddy, it was never mentioned. So maybe Zoro is gonna find his long-lost parents somewhere in the country of Wano. I'd be alright with that, but I wasn't all on board with that theory, because I'm like, okay, you gotta give me something a little bit more than just the fact that, you know, he uses swords, and, you know, his name's Zolo, he's just like a samurai, and Wano is the country of samurai. There has to be something else here to really tie it together, or else I'm not gonna be 100% on board with this. Also, you know, we just had an arc, Totland, that focused on the mystery of one of the Straw Hats' backstories, and that was Sanji. You know, oh, here's Sanji's parents that we never knew about up until this point, a completely, you know, separate part of his backstory that was never even really expanded on before in the story, and we're finding that out in Totland. And now, like, in the very next arc, we're now gonna find the mystery of Zoro's parents this whole time. So, I don't know, that just seems like kind of bunched together there. But then again, Zoro and Sanji do kind of have that rivalry going on there. So it'd be kind of funny, like, Sanji goes up to Zoro like, hey, Zoro, we found out about my mysterious backstory last arc. How about you? We don't know anything about you. And then Zoro's like, oh, I would like to introduce you to my mother and father, Mr. and Mrs. Roanoa. They were hanging out at the local sake pub when I discovered them. Oh, well, dang it, you beat me again. So, I mean, it would be alright. But, now, there is something that was dropped recently in an SBS that might very well be the smoking gun, or maybe the blood-splattered sword, whatever term you want to use here, depending on the locale. So, you know this dude, this is the guy, his name's Minatomo, by the way. He's the guy that, was Frankie's foreman at the Flower Capital, when we first get to see what Usopp and Frankie and Robin and everybody are doing at Wano. He's the guy with nails shoved up his nose, which, convenient place to put nails, but maybe not the most hygienic or, you know, safe. But yeah, okay, I'm sure he gets a bloody nose all the time, and he just goes to the doctor. I'm like, Doc, how come I keep getting bloody noses? And he's like, I don't know, it seems like you have, like, these weird foreign objects shoved. Are you shoving anything up your nose, sir? Nah, I don't think so. I gotta get back to work, you know? So, anyway, yeah, that dude, kind of important to this SBS. Okay, there's another dude that's very similar to him living in the East. We actually see him in Fuchsia Village, right? In, like, the very early parts of the manga, right? And, you know, someone sent Oda a question, like, is it the same character? And in traditional Oda fashion, you gotta love the man for this, because, you know, this is like a gag character, right? It's somebody that's not important. It's kind of like, he's like one rung above, like, Sam, or like Panda Man, where Panda Man just always appears in the background, never really gets involved. Although someday, he might get involved. Don't be surprised by that. Like, the Straw Hats are, you know, running around Raftel trying to find the location of the One Piece, and all of a sudden, Panda Man just walks out of a dark alleyway like, I'll point you to the right direction. Like, that might very well happen. You never know, because Panda Man is basically like Oda's interpretation of himself into the story a little bit, kind of. But anyway, yeah, this guy, not really relevant, but Oda takes this opportunity to tell you guys a little bit about, like, a mystery that's going to be unraveled at some point during Wano. He mentions this. He's like, okay, Minatomo, the guy we see at Wano, and the guy that was in the East Blue, not the same person, but they're related. You could say they're brothers or distant cousins, whatever. That's not important. What is important is that Oda also drops the information that a few decades ago, there was a ship from Wano that made it to the East, stop, and just... That's a relevant thing just in and of itself, like a ship from the New World getting to the East Blue, which means that it had to go all the way back through the New World, sail through Fishman Island, get back up into Paradise, and then sail through the Calm Belt into the East. Not very many ways to get from, you know, Wano, New World, all the way to the East Blue, so that in just of itself is kind of relevant, like, what was the purpose of that voyage? What was so important in the East Blue that the citizens of Wano decided to board a ship that was essentially a death voyage in order to get back to that sea? That's a little weird just in and of itself, but going beyond that right now, a ship from Wano made it to the East, and a descendant of somebody on that ship is somebody that we know very well. That's what Oda said. He also closes it out by saying, you know, I'll probably mention this in the actual manga, but it's not going to be like a huge plot point or anything. It's just like a minor story that I want to tell or I want to wrap up, okay? So, don't... That's what makes me think it's not Zoro he's referring to. Like, oh yeah, like, back in the day, Zoro's parents, you know, went upon a merry sea voyage into the East, and then they landed there and they gave birth to Zoro, and then they either died or they returned to Wano or whatever. Because that seems like, you know, I mean... I guess, I mean, not every Straw Hat needs to have, like, a super expanded backstory with their parents. We already know Zoro's backstory with Kuina, and that already speaks volumes. I mean, it really might... Hey, you know what? It might be the first instance where, like, a Straw Hat's parents don't result in some horrible, grisly death. Because it's Mother's Day today, and I was gonna get on here and, like, let's wish happy tidings to all of the mothers to the Straw Hats. Like Luffy's mom. Okay, we don't know her. Frankie's mom. No, she abandoned him. Robin's mom. No, she dead. Brooke's mom. No, she most likely dead, too. Sanji's mom. She dead, too. Nami's mom. She's super dead. Double over, because she's an orphan. And her foster mother, also dead as a doornail. Okay. Usopp's mom, no, dead. Chopper's mom. Chopper's mom might be still alive, his biological mom. Reindeer can live a while, right? And if not, you can always include Dr. Kureha as his motherly figure. Dr. Kureha! Happy Mother's Day, Dr. Kureha! You're the closest thing to a maternal figure in the Straw Hat's life that hasn't croaked or abandoned their children. Yeah, is that everybody? That's it. What about Jinbei's mom? I bet Jinbei's mom was a swell lady. She made those, she made that coral reef pie for her son. Oh, I'm sure she's a lovely lady. You know, she probably still lives in Fishman Island. We just didn't get to see her. She's an older lady. She just lives by herself on the outskirts of the village like, oh, I love my son, Jinbei. I can't wait until he brings his friends over for some tea, you know? Okay, so she might be still alive. All right. Bottom line, though, I don't think Zoro was the person he was referring to. I don't think it was. I think it was the Tashigi Kuina little side plot here. I think that's the thing he was referring to, and that's the thing he was going to wrap up. And the way that Oda worded it, keep in mind, Oda might always be screwing with us, because he tends to do that too. He might be like, oh no, this is going to be a total huge plot point, but I'm just going to fake you out and make you think it's not going to be a big deal, but it's actually going to be a huge deal. You can't put that past him. He might very well do that. But, you know, it might just be like, okay, yeah, what's the deal with Kuina and Tashigi? They look remarkably similar. There has to be a connection here, or something in some way. Some people have said, oh, she is Kuina, she just lost her memories or something, or she could be a body double, maybe she's Wano royalty, and it's like a body double there, or they're twins, and, you know, a lot of stuff going on with that. Okay, let me call your attention to this graph, this informational graphic I have right here. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that's a picture of Nami's boobs from the last episode. Sorry, every time I watch a new episode, I have to like, oh, okay, well, there's the boobs for that episode. Let me log them in the file folder. I need to organize that better. Okay, this chart right here. Okay, so, from what we see here, this is just a very basic timeline of when these characters were born and major events going on in the One Piece manga right now in Wano. So, we have 51 years ago, this is when Koushirou was born, and we know from the Viva Ricard Visual Dictionary he was born in the East. This is something that kind of throws a wrench in this whole thing, because if you were going to tell me Koushirou was born, even if Oda didn't come out and say he was born on Wano, if he just said he was born somewhere in the Grand Line, that's where his origin, you know, lies, I could still run with that, right? Because you could say, okay, Koushirou was born on Wano. He was on that ship a few decades ago that sailed to the east. He set up a dojo. He gave birth to Kuina and Tashigi, maybe they were twins and they got separated or something, and then boom, boom, cheerio, there you go. But that's not the case. It is stated as the Sea of Origin, Koushirou is the East Blue. All right, so he was born in the East. Now, that just means he was born there. He could have easily, maybe his parents or his grandparents or somebody were from Wano, and he was born in the East, and he traveled to Wano with his parents or grandparents, or maybe he was just curious about his past, or maybe, hey, we don't know a lot about Koshirou's backstory. Maybe in his early days, maybe back when he was in his teenage years, like the same age as Zoro, like in his early 20s, maybe he was a pirate, or maybe not a pirate, but he wanted to travel the world. So he set out from the East Blue, where he was born, and he sailed the seas and the Grand Line, and he eventually made it to Wano, and that's where he studied swordsmanship, and that's how he learned about, you know, his sword style and hockey and everything, and you will cut the piece of paper and all that stuff. And then after he studied on Wano for a number of years, you know, possibly with some, like, strong characters like Hyogoro, maybe he knew Yasue. He then returned to the East Blue, which was his homeland, and he founded the Shimosuke village and the Isshin Dojo. Okay, because Shimosuke, Shimo just means frost and Suki moon, and it actually has very, the moon kanji also appears in Kozuki. Okay, so the kanji for Kozuki is Hikari, which is light, and then Suki, or Suki, for moon, and then Shimo for frost, and then Suki is Shimosuke, which is Yasue's family name. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There is a connection there, okay? So, maybe, because we don't know, a big thing here is we don't know how old Yasue is, or was, before he, you know, got, you know, off into the great beyond. We don't know how old he was. If he was, like, in his late 60s, 70s, that might make sense, because Koushirou is 51, so let's say he traveled to Wano and at the same age Zoro was when he was, like, in his early 20s, so, like, 30-something years ago, and let's say Yasue would have been, like, in his 30s or 40s also at that point to teach him and train him in the art of the sword. Also, Hyogoro would have been there. Now, Hyogoro, here's the thing you have to understand. He was the one that was talking about, you know, the Wano version of hockey and how you could use it to, like, you know, the sword analogy, the sword and paper analogy, you know, if a swordsman knows about hockey, you know, they can cut only what they want to cut. So if it's like they're going to cut a piece of paper, if they don't want to cut it, the sword won't cut it. But if they want to cut steel, if they desire it, the sword will be able to cut steel, okay? That's the analogy that Hyogoro used when explaining this concept to Luffy. Now, a lot of people immediately jump to Koushirou, because that's the same analogy that Koushirou taught Zoro. I didn't immediately think that meant that, like, Koushirou taught Hyogoro everything about hockey and stuff. Number one, hockey's already existed in Wano for centuries, because Ryuma had his black sword when he slayed the dragon and everything before he died, and that was 400 years ago, so we knew swordsmen, and these are some of the strongest warriors in all of One Piece, the samurai of Wano, so of course they would have figured out this a while ago. I think just more likely it was reversed. Rather, Koushirou was not the person that came up with this. When Koushirou traveled to Wano sometime in his backstory, he learned the concept, learned the paper analogy with hockey and everything, brought that back to the east when he founded his Isshin Dojo in Shimosuke Village, and then taught that to all of his students. So that's why Zoro knows about it, and that was his footsteps on learning observation hockey in his fight with Daz Bones. Are you following me on this? Okay, back to the graphic. No, those are Vivi's boobs now. Okay, here we go. All right, so yeah, Koushirou, 51 years ago, he was born. Now, here's something interesting. Tashigi and Kuina were born a year apart. They were both from the east, Tashigi being born 23 years ago and Kuina being born 22 years ago. So that rules out at least the idea that they were born at the same time as, like, twins. But still, they could be related very, very closely. And to be fair, we never get a look at Koshirou's wife. This is the clearest image we get of her, and she's off panel. This might not even be her. I would like to assume it is, but it might not be. But yeah, so let's say they're both the daughters of Koushirou, and Kuina decided to study at the dojo, and then maybe something happened with Tashigi. Maybe the parents got divorced or something, and Koushirou kept Kuina, and then the wife took Tashigi off somewhere else, and she ended up joining the Marines at some point. The similarity is, it's freaky, you know? You can't just say, oh yeah, Tashigi and Kuina, they look similar, but there's absolutely no connection whatsoever. Bullshit. This is anime. This is manga. I'm not saying, like, in real life, you can run into people that are very similar to you. It doesn't mean that they're related to you by blood. You know, somewhere out there in the world, there's probably somebody that has a very similar mug than what you have, alright? Doesn't mean you're distantly related. But in the world of fiction, in the world of manga, you know, you meet two characters that look remarkably similar, it's gonna tie back. It has to relate to something. Alright, so they're definitely related in some way. And then 21 years ago is, of course, when Zoro was born. And then 20 years ago, that's when Kaido and Orochi took over. The reason that that's relevant is that Koushirou was already living in the East when Kuina was born, because Kuina's home origin was the East. So that means if Koushirou visited Wano, which I'm thinking he most certainly has had to at some point, he was born in the East, raised in the East probably, went to Wano, learned swordsmanship, came back to the East, and then when he was 29 years old, so 22 years ago, he was in the East when Kuina was born. So that means by the time Kaido and Orochi took over the land of Wano, Koushirou had already left. That ship that was carrying the descendants of, you know, somebody that we know very well that Oda talked about in the SBS, that voyage probably also happened long before Kaido and Orochi took power. Alright, so you can't even say that it was an escape. I mean, I guess you could, because he only said a few decades. When I hear a few decades, I like to think longer than just a couple of decades, longer than just 20 years ago. I like to think like 30 years ago, or something more than that. But then again, this might just be a matter of opinion. You know, it certainly would give you a good reason why they left Wano for the East, to escape. There might... How about this? How about there was a branch family of the Shimosuke, or maybe a branch family of Wano citizens that moved to the East, like hundreds of years ago. Then Kaido takes over, and a bunch of the citizens of Wano are like, holy crap, we need to get the hell out of here because, you know, Kaido's a dragon god and Orochi's an idiot and he's taken over. We need to get as many men, women, and children out of this country to, you know, keep the legacy of the samurai alive. So they bail out of Wano 20 years ago and they're like, okay, where do we go? It's like, well, there's that branch family that lives in the east. We could go there and seek refuge there. And they did. The only thing is that this kind of screws things up because Koushirou would not have been on that ship because he's already been living in the east for at least the past 2 years. Kuina was born 22 years ago, and then 20 years ago, that's when Kaido attacked, if you're going to assume that's when that ship left. Now, and also Zoro would have also already been born at this point, so you can't even say, alright, not Koushirou, but maybe Zoro's parents were on that ship escaping Wano after Kaido. No, because Zoro would have already been a year old living in the east by the time Kaido attacked. So I really think that this ship that Oda was talking about, it was longer than 20 years ago. But I'm just still trying to figure out a way, like, why they would leave Wano and head to the east. You know, because that's a very dangerous voyage. You would not do that unless there was a very, very important reason. You wouldn't do it just to be like, I want to go see my family in the east. Like, all right, but it's going to be dangerous. You know, so there has to be a reason because of that. Okay. So yeah, now, yeah, so those are the dates we don't know about, you know, when that boat left, and also Yasue's age and Hyogoro's age as well. Hyogoro looks like he's in his 70s. He looks like a pretty old, doddering dude, maybe even older, you know, but Yasue, I mean, you could pass for maybe 60s, maybe early 70s, but more probably 60s and stuff like that. So how I think this went is, yeah, Koushirou went to Wano, studied with the blade, came back, and maybe out of honor of Yasue, because you could say maybe Koushirou is related to Yasue. We don't know Koshirou's last name, but it could have been like maybe the Shimosuke clan left Wano, or at least a branch of it, went to the east. Koushirou was born as Koushirou Shimosuke, and then maybe he got curious about his backstory, went to Wano, met Yasue there. They learned swordsmanship from him. He traveled back, and now he's like, I am a member of the Shimosuke clan of Wano. I have met the daimyo of the Hakumai region, who is, you know, the leader of my clan or whatever, and now I'm going to, you know, build a village in the east and train them in the art of Bushido and all that crazy Wano crap, and then I'm going to do that, and then that's the way my life is going to be. Yeah, it also probably lends to believe why Koushirou and his dojo helped out Dragon, because if Wano is like isolationist and everything, and they don't like the world government, you know, butting in on their affairs, it would make sense why Koushirou would want to help out the revolutionaries in that regard, you know, because he probably doesn't care for the world government very much also. Now, as for Kuina, it was pretty much stated in the visual dictionary we got that, yeah, she's gone. She's no longer alive. All right, she fell down some stairs, or she was defeated by a rival swordmaster, and we never see her again. The falling down the stairs thing, I still feel is a more kind of shitty end for her life, you know, but okay, whatever, that's the canon, that's at least the canon explanation we were given, okay? And we see her body, well, in the sense that we see her body lying on the ground with a cloth covering it, that's all we really get, and we see her tombstone that Koushirou still pays, like, respects to and everything, like, after the time skip, after the Straw Hats came back, you know, Koushirou takes the newspaper of the Straw Hats return and puts it next to Kuina's grave. So, and with that, and with the visual dictionary, we can assume, yeah, Kuina's 6 feet under. She's actually properly dead. But that doesn't throw away the idea that perhaps Kuina had an older sister who is Tashigi, that for some reason or another got separated at birth, ended up, you know, still in the east, just at Logtown, being raised by Smoker to become a Marine, met Zoro, and then just through a series of, you know, weird, you know, events, she ended up meeting Zoro again, and then ended up going to Wano. It would be really cool if Smoker and Tashigi went to Wano. I've mentioned this plenty of times before, because right now Smoker and Tashigi should be with Vegapunk. They went there with the children from Punk Hazard, so that, you know, maybe Vegapunk could figure out some way to reverse their gigantification. We also know that Fujitora went to go see Vegapunk. We know the people of Wano, Orochi at, you know, Wano really wants Vegapunk to help, you know, expand his power and stuff. So I don't think it would be too far of a cry to somehow get Smoker and Tashigi, and Vegapunk included, over into Wano's borders. Not really sure how the journey would go or how they would be welcomed or anything. And of course, there's the whole thing with that the Marines don't get involved with Wano, and Smoker and Tashigi are high-ranking members of the Marines. There's concerns with that. But I think you can make that work. And I just want to see Smoker and Tashigi again. We only got really see them during Punk Hazard arc, and that was it. And we haven't really got to see them in action since then. They're actually going to be in the new movie, Stampede, so that's looking forward to that, of course. But that would be cool to have them in Stampede, and also maybe around the same time, maybe in August, they're also in Wano ripping things up. You know, that would be neat. And Tashigi, you know, she's a huge sword geek, you know, so, you know, it just fits for her to be in Wano. And then maybe while they're there, if Tashigi shows up and finds Zoro and they run into somebody who's part of the Shimosuke family, or if Koushirou's not a Shimosuke, maybe part of Koshirou's family's clan, whoever that is, and they explain the whole situation. They explain it. They're like, oh yeah, maybe long ago Koshirou's ancestors left on a ship to the east, and they gave birth to Koushirou, and then Koushirou gave birth to Tashigi and Kuina, and they got separated at birth. Because something else you also have to keep in mind, that SBS, it only said a descendant of somebody on there is somebody that we know. It didn't say the son or the daughter of somebody on that ship was somebody we know. Descendant might also refer to, like, not, you know, like granddaughter, grandson, great-granddaughter, great-grandson. Might also refer to that. Probably not great-granddaughter, great-grandson. If it's only a few decades ago, probably not that far down, but it could be like, you know, 40, 50 years ago, Koshirou's parents arrive in the East, give birth to Koushirou. A few decades later, Koushirou and his wife give birth to Kuina and possibly Tashigi, and then that's the person that Oda was referring to. So, you gotta think about this. You gotta think about this. There's definitely a connection, though, now. I don't know if there's a connection enough to say that, like, oh, Zoro's definitely from Wano, OMG, guys. But I think the plot that he's going to be wrapping up is the Kuina Tashigi plot. Because once again, like, you could spin it so that that plot is really interesting. Like, you could spin it like, perhaps, like, before we knew Orochi, and before we even knew his name was Orochi, and before we really knew the intricacies of Wano, I even threw out an idea, like, they're gonna get to Wano, and it turns out that Kuina is the long-lost freaking shogun of Wano there, or Tashigi was, like, her body double. I was reading a lot of Kingdom at this point, as you can probably tell. But, like, something like that went down, and so you could spin it into a huge plot line like that. But then we get to Wano and we find out about Orochi and everybody, and it's just, I think the visual dictionary comes out and Kuina's dead, you know, and so it's just like, oh, okay, well, it really does seem that it's not going to be a huge plot thing, but Oda's finally going to wrap it up. That's just like, yeah, you were curious about the Kuina and Tashigi thing, here you go, here's the answer to that. Nothing major, it's not like it's going to really affect things in the current storyline all too much, but now Tashigi maybe knows about her birth and knows about her sister, and then Zoro figures out why she looks so similar to Kuina, his childhood friend, and then Zoro and Tashigi can embrace and kiss and make out, and they can run off into the sunset together, and then they can start a family. You know, and many fan fictions and doujins can be written thereafter. I think that is the most logical way that we're going to go about this. You know, makes sense, right? It just makes perfect sense. All right, well, what do you guys think about it? What do you think about the ship that brought people from Wano over to the east? Why do you think they went? How far back in the past was that? Do you think Tashigi and Kuina are sisters, maybe separated at birth, or some not separated at birth because Kuina is a year younger than Tashigi, but separated for some other reason? What's the deal with Koushirou and the relationship to the Shimosuke? Is he Koushirou Shimosuke? Is he like part of Yasue's family, like a branch family that lived in the east for decades before this? Or did he just name the village Shimosuke after his, you know, after Yasue because he had respect for him because he was his master that taught him the blade? How does Hyogoro fashion in all this? There's a lot of questions for below. You see where this goes, but I think more of this is going to be elucidated as we go. Oda's probably gonna tie it all back together. Maybe before we get to the final battle. Maybe it's like Tashigi and Smoker arrive at Wano, and just long enough for Zoro to meet up, and then we find out about their backstory and how all this clicks together, and it's like, okay, well, that's how that went. Final battle's in 3 hours. Get ready, you know? Okay, and now Tashigi can go into battle like, I now know about my family's legacy, or something like that. You know, and Zoro's like, I now know why I have a boner every time I'm next to you. Wait, what? Never mind. Let's go. Hiyori's in the background like, wait, what? Who's she? Oh my god! Oh my god! Okay. All right. Remember back when I thought about that theory that Kuina was going to turn out to be the secret super sexy Shogun of Wano, and we were going to have this awkward love triangle where it's like Zoro meets Tashigi and then Kuina, and they all kind of look at each other like, what the hell? You could still have that, except nix Kuina and just have Tashigi, Zoro, and Hiyori. And you could still have it. Hiyori has turquoise hair. That's similar to the blue hair, you know. You could click that together. Yeah, you could make a funny scene. The love triangle could still exist. All right, good. Okay, have a great night, everybody. This will be Tekking101 signing out.